Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. I just got a question for you. Do you believe that human beings are inherently good or inherently bad? Or I should say, do you believe that human beings are inherently noble or are they inherently corrupted? I'm not speaking about the value and importance of human beings. I hope we can all agree that all human beings are important and that they're all valuable. And if we can't agree with that, then I think we have some really serious problems. But we're gonna go with the assumption that human life is valuable, that human beings are valuable. Although I will admit that I'm going to address this a little bit later, that sometimes that even that assumption is problematic given some of the nature of politics these days. But we'll get to that. My question to you is: do you believe that human beings are born with their moral compass pointed in the right direction? That human beings are born and they overall, even though we make some mistakes now and then, that human beings are overall noble and good and pointed in the right direction? Or do you believe that human beings are inherently corrupt and sinful, and therefore cause all kinds of problems? I'm going to submit to you that your answer to that question will likely inform not likely, will inform much of your outlook on life. It will affect how you view politics, how you view religion, how you view social issues, how you look at society, and I really want to dive into that and explain that. It's a very fundamental question that most people don't even really spend time to reflect on. But I would submit to you that it's one of the most important questions that everybody should confront. Are people, generally speaking, are they inherently good or are they inherently corrupt? Now, there's a lot to unpack in that, because in order to even answer that question, this is important, in order to even answer that question, we have to agree on a standard. What is good? What does it mean to be good? And in order to even address that, it's impossible to answer that without some kind of objective standard, because otherwise you're dealing with a subjective standard. And so I know many of you watching this don't share my faith, but I actually want to talk directly to you in this case. Many of you may share my faith, but yet you kind of are feeling yourself wandering in confusion and uncertainty about what's going on in politics right now. And let me address that too a little bit. I because I'm a pastor, I get texts and emails and comments and everything from all kinds of people, family, friends, church members, asking me about my perspective on this political election, or asking me, or basically telling me how I should think. I get a lot of that too. This is how you should be seeing things. I get a lot of that. And I've always been a bigger picture guy. To me, one of the most troubling aspects of this election season is when you get right down to it, this election really, in the minds of most people, is a referendum on Donald Trump. And the entire election is really kind of centered around the personality of Donald Trump. And most people either love him or they hate and despise him, and believe that we should use any and all means necessary to remove him from office. Many people believe that. And I'm actually one of the strange people. I am definitely in the minority when I say this, that I neither worship and adore Donald Trump, nor do I hate Donald Trump. I believe Donald Trump is a human being, just like I am, and I believe that Donald Trump is right on some things and he's wrong on some things, and I don't look to Donald Trump to solve my problems or to solve the problems of society, just as I do not look to any other political figure to do so. I don't put my hope and my trust in Donald Trump or in Joe Biden or previously in Barack Obama or in any political figure or political party. And yet, unfortunately, I'm finding that most Americans today are obsessed, either for or against. They're obsessed with Donald Trump. Either they see him as the individual who is championing in fighting for them, and that they need him. They are dependent upon him. He needs to stay in office, and if he doesn't stay in office, the country will collapse, or their lives will collapse and fall apart. Or vice versa, they believe that he is Satan incarnate, and that getting rid of him is the key to fixing all the problems in America. And I don't want to minimize the importance of this election. And with this video, I am neither endorsing Donald Trump, nor am I encouraging you to vote against him. I believe that you should vote your conscience. I believe you should vote based on how you intelligently and thoughtfully see America, and examine your values and so forth. But again, that's really what's at the crux here, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do, is really examine your values. Look at your beliefs and your convictions. Most people go through life and they never reflect on their convictions. And one of the reasons why politics has devolved into a spectator sport in many respects, and a cult of personality, whether you're pro or anti Donald Trump. And one of the reasons why politics now resembles the WWE Wrestling Federation, or is it still called WWE, WWF? I can't remember, but one of the reasons, I think it used to be WWF, right? Now it's WWE. Anyway, one of the reasons why it's is because most people are reactive instead of proactive. Most people react instead of acting, and most people react to other people who are sure about where they stand and sure about what their values are, and are out there leading the charge. And most people react to the players that they see on the field, whether we're talking about politics or sports. And we're seeing that where most people are content to kind of be in the stands, and maybe they will shout loud and try to make a lot of noise. Just think about the old Roman Colosseum gladiator games. They'll shout and cheer. Maybe if they really get into it, they'll try to throw stuff on the field to cheer on their gladiator. But ultimately, most people are spectators. They may be loud spectators. They may be the kind of spectators that want to run onto the field even at times. But they're more spectators because they don't really know deep down what they stand for and why they stand for it. Most people don't know what they believe or why they even believe it. And they're just reactive, and therefore most people are following their feelings, their impulses. They're seeking out what pleases them, what makes them feel good, and opposing what seems to be objectionable or whatnot. And a lot of people today are basing their political perspectives and their political views on, what are my friends saying? What's my family saying? What is society saying? And people, want to jump on the bandwagon and kind of be in the majority, because it's almost kind of a tribal thing and a self-preservation thing in some respect. We don't want to be seen as the oddball, the weirdos and whatnot, and so we want to kind of fit in. We don't want to be marginalized. We don't want to be persecuted or whatnot, and therefore we tend to be sympathetic, depending on the situation, sympathetic often to others who are marginalized and persecuted. Again, depending on the reasons for their being marginalized and persecuted. But there's a lot to unpack here. But the bottom line is, the core basis of what you believe in and what you stand for comes down to really one of three questions, and the people that are the deepest thinkers appreciate the fact, and I don't mean that like you can't be a deep thinker. Anyone that has any mental or emotional capacity at all can think deeply. It's just that we get lazy and we don't. Okay, so I'm not being negative or insensitive when I say that. You can do this. Okay, and I'm not. By the way, I'm not saying I'm the deepest thinker at all by any stretch of the imagination. But I do take time to really think through what I'm observing in society right now, and there's a lot to be deeply concerned about, frankly, right now. So. But the three questions that really decide where a person is, in the direction they are, and how they see the world, how they see reality, are the following. Is truth relative or is truth objective? Is truth transcendent and objective, or is it situational and based solely on a person's perspective and a person's needs and a person's situation in life? That's question number one, the nature of truth. Question number two, is there a creator? Whether you want to call God or Allah, or as the atheist will mockingly and sneeringly say, this flying spaghetti monster, or whatever, is there a creator? And some today that are more into like New Age type spirituality will refer to the universe as the creator and kind of adopt more of a pantheistic worldview. And ultimately, there really are only a few explanations for reality, and those explanations would be monotheism, polytheism, pantheism, or atheism. And there really isn't anything else. You really don't have any other options. It's one of those. And polytheism is logically untenable if you really examine that and really chase that out and consider, because polytheism, ultimately what it really is referring to in actual practicality is the idea of there being a lot of extraordinary beings that have more power and more abilities than other beings, like Zeus and the Roman and Greek gods and so forth. But they're not really those. None of those polytheistic gods of the ancient world were all powerful and everywhere present. They don't have those divine attributes that we would typically associate with Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, and so there's a reason for that, because you can't have two all-powerful beings. It's a logical contradiction. So, and I can do a whole separate video on that if you want me to, and I'll be happy to. So if you don't agree with me, tell me in the comments, and I will do a whole other video to respond to that. But polytheism is not logically, does not logically play out. It just doesn't work. So really, you're left with either monotheism, pantheism, or atheism. And monotheism is pretty straightforward. Monotheism is found in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then pantheism is basically the universe is divine, and the universe is self-containing and self-sufficient and so forth. And then of course atheism is there is no God, there is no divine being, there is no creator, and nature is all that is, was, or ever will be. And that's atheism. And so ultimately, one of those three must be true and must explain all of reality. And how you fall on that is going to really determine how you see the world. So again, number one, it's the nature of truth. Number two, the nature of reality, the nature of the universe. Is there a transcendent creative force or being behind it, or is it just here we are and we're just all kind of here by natural selection or by virtue of the universe, kind of an abstract kind of thing. So and then question three, what is the nature of man? And by that I mean humanity, the nature of human beings. Are human beings inherently good, or are they inherently corrupt? Those three questions, the nature of truth, the nature of the universe / reality, and the nature of humanity, those three questions really deep down fundamentally drive your perspective and how you will approach politics, relationships, sexuality, religion, even science, and all of that. And this is something oftentimes people will pit, like science versus religion, and that is a really short-sighted way, because that is not as deep as I'm going here. Okay, because science is a field of study, and who does the studying? Human beings. And so science as a field of study is only as effective and only as significant and only as reliable as the people engaged in the field of science. And the same thing is true with history and any other academic field you can think of. In fact, if we're going to look at the academic fields, the most significant academic field, the one that's most impactful, and that word can be overused, I know, but the one that's most impactful and significant of all the academic fields, the master discipline really is philosophy, and particularly in logic. And this gets, of course, into the mathematics and so forth too. But it's how you think. That's really the most significant one, because science is dependent on philosophy, and there's all kinds of philosophical assumptions that drive modern science. So anyway, I'm going deeper than I wanted to, but those three questions ultimately will determine how you come down on political issues, how you come down in this we're in the middle of this election season right now. And I want to encourage you, if you really want to be, I don't want to be insulting here when I say this, but if you really want to rise above mediocrity and kind of see things from a bigger perspective, then you need to be examining and thinking through these fundamental issues and questions, and instead of letting your emotions and your identity be driven by particular personalities. Because Donald Trump is at some point going to retire from American politics and be moving off the scene at some point. And then the United States still continues. And to get even deeper than that, the United States is not going to be here forever. And you really have to be a well-rounded human being, and to be someone who can navigate through the contours of life and really have wisdom and understand life. You've really got to be able to look underneath the hood, to use a car illustration. Not just jump in the car and drive from point A to point B, but look under the hood, understand how the car operates, you know. And the same thing is true. You got to understand what this thing called life is all about. So again, nature of truth, nature of reality / the universe. Part of that is there a creator, and then number 3, the nature of humanity. And for this video, I just want to chase that third question, the nature of humanity, because ultimately I find when I look at the political world and the political debates right now, and all the differences of opinion out there that I see on social media and so forth, people are kind of adopting certain assumptions and so forth related to this without really examining it, without really understanding it. So here's the nature of humanity question at a real fundamental level, and I hope you'll really key on this and focus on this. The nature of humanity is: are human beings fundamentally good, or are they fundamentally corrupted? Because, and this is a big one, because if you believe human beings are good, and then you look at all the problems in the world, you're going to have to wrestle. Okay, if human beings are good, how come there are so many problems? At a 90,000 foot level, your conclusion is going to be, it must be the systems. It must be the way we've chosen to organize ourselves as a society. The problem must be the family, how the family's been organized. The problems must be the economy, how we've organized the economy. The problems must be our justice system, or these nation-state countries and so forth, and how we've organized everything. So the problem, the reason why we haven't arrived at nirvana or utopia, the reason we haven't achieved total human happiness and perfect justice and harmony, the reason why is because we've got all these institutions and systems and creations of yesteryear in the way, and that's the problem. Society, and how society has chosen to organize itself over the years, that's the problem. And now, whereas if you believe that human beings are fundamentally corrupt and are fundamentally flawed, then your perspective is going to be, society's not the problem, we're the problem. Individual human beings are the problem, and every individual human being is a sinner, and because of that, every country is going to be full of sin. Every system is going to be flawed and imperfect because it's made up of flawed and imperfect people. Every family is going to have issues and problems because families are made up of flawed and imperfect people. So therefore, it's not, therefore, a person operating from that point of view is going to be very restrained. And okay, we got to be careful here when we form systems, when we form governments, when we form countries. We don't want to give those entities too much power, because they're going to be corrupt. They're going to be corrupt. Instead, what we need to do is limit their power and authority and put some checks and balances in place. And we're going to have to give people freedom, because yes, people are flawed, but you know what? We want to cast out some high principles and ideals up here, and get people to look to those ideas and principles so they will live up to those ideas and principles. And while we're doing that, let's limit the power of human governments and human societies and human institutions, and let's make sure there's checks and balances in there, and then that way, you know, we'll just do the best we can to get through life, okay? And some people are going to make it, and some people aren't. All right, now, if you haven't guessed by now, the United States of America was founded on that point of view that I just described. The United States of America was founded on the idea that human beings are fundamentally flawed, and therefore government needs to be limited, and therefore what we need to do is set up ideas and principles to which all people can aspire. And the best thing that our country can do is set up these principles and encourage everyone to live up to those principles. But in the meantime, we just got to give people freedom, give them the tools they need to succeed, have them with a goal orientation in life, a forward movement orientation in life, and just recognize there is going to be sin, there is going to be cause and effect, there are going to be problems, there are going to be injustices in the present and in the past, but we're just going to have to roll with that and deal with that as best we can, because that's the nature of humanity. Okay? That's the classic conservative view of life, and that is what the United States of America was founded upon. Now, the other view of life is that human beings are not the problem. It's society and the way society has organized itself over the years. That's the problem. And some in that view will go even further and say, and this is kind of a twist, they'll say lack of knowledge and awareness is the problem. Hear me on that, because that's now the twist that we're hearing. That human beings, the more aware they are, the more noble they are. The more knowledge they have, the better off they will be. And that's where we start to get to terms like woke and so forth. So the more knowledge and awareness we have, the better off we will be. You know, humanity can then unleash its inner goodness that way, the more knowledge and awareness that we have. And those institutions that stifle that learning, that hold us back from being aware and from being woke, so to speak, those institutions are the problem, and they need to go. This is why a lot of people have a great amount of hostility toward religion, because they believe, in some cases, let's be honest, they're right, they're correct on this. In many ways, there's always, even in lies, there's an element of truth to the most effective and persistent lies. But they will look at religion and say religion has stifled people, manipulated people, coerced people, and held people back, and limited their knowledge and discouraged their learning. And religion is a dark force in our history, and the less religion we have, the better. And that really is the humanist, collectivist view of humanity, that what we need to do is reorient and reorganize ourselves in a way that we get rid of the dark, limiting institutions and systems of the past, and instead organize ourselves better based on the greater knowledge and awareness that we have today. And so you'll see people in that camp, they will practically worship at the feet of science and attempts on the part of human beings to create new systems of organization to end oppression. And another whole angle on this, by the way, is that if human beings are inherently good, then what often flows from that is the objective of life is happiness. To be happy, that's the objective of life. Because it's, let's be honest, if you believe all human beings are inherently good and that society is the problem, how society has organized itself is the problem, particularly how the ignorant forces of society have organized themselves, if you believe that's the problem, then you're kind of in a framework, in a paradigm that the objective is happiness and the enemy is anything that that stands in the way of between me and happiness. Or you look at Maslow's hierarchy, we're basically getting into the higher levels there of self-actualization. And so it's really interesting to study all this out. It's very interesting. But what I want to say, one of the reasons why we're so divided right now in the United States, why we're so much at each other's throats, and why is you've now got two very fundamental visions of society and reality in conflict with each other. And if you just focus on Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, you're going to miss that. Because the truth is that you can find elements of each of those points of view on all sides of the political debate right now. But generally speaking, the classic conservative pro-founding father position, and I'm going to make, as a pastor, I try not to become partisan and make too many political endorsements here and so forth. But I'm going to argue that Donald Trump is not a classic conservative. He's not. Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party in a different direction, and he's taken the conservative movement in a very different direction. And what we're starting to see in the kind of America First view, and I'm trying to say this is, and I believe what Timothy Keller said, that you should do your best to describe your other people's viewpoints in a way that they will own, and not try to just slam other people. Try to describe them in as fair and even in a benevolent way as possible. And so I'm trying to do that all around here. And what Trump's view of America is a very nationalistic kind of flag-waving kind of view, and it's almost like our tribe, the American tribe, is superior, and that's just the way it is because it's us. I remember having a discussion many years ago with a guy I met in Mississippi briefly. I did kind of an internship on a congressional campaign in Mississippi in the late 1980s when I was a college student. And this was at the height of the Cold War during the Reagan years. This was as the Cold War was kind of at the height right before the Soviet Union fell. Okay, so this was in 1988, and I remember talking with my buddy down there, and during this internship, and he was saying that the Cold War between the United States and the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, it wasn't really about ideas that we just use. When America talks about the human rights violations of the USSR, we just do it as a prick, as a tool, as a weapon. It's really us against them. That's a tribalistic mindset, where it's our country against them. It's our party against them. It's our movement against them. It's us against them, and issues become tools. And the truth, then, the facts become very malleable in that sense. And that's kind of, and I know some of my fellow Republican conservative friends here are going to get really upset with me for saying this, but we got to be honest here. That's where a lot of Trump's Americanism is coming from. That mindset. Hey, we're America. America. It's us against the world, us against them, whatever. And we're the best, and we're going to be the best, and we're going to do whatever we can, and but that's not the founding fathers' vision of America, and that's not the classic conservative view that kind of traces throughout American history. That most of the reformers, actually, from Elizabeth Cady Stanton to Susan B. Anthony to Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King, even, they all, even though they were not conservative, politically speaking, in some respects, they were aligned with that classic conservative vision when it came to reform, because the classic reform vision was to call America to live up to its founding principles. So it's not, in other words, patriotism is rooted in the principles as opposed to being rooted in the blood or the soil or the nation state boundaries. Now, I'm not slandering everyone in the Republican Party or everyone in the Trump administration. I'm just pointing out that what we're seeing in recent years is kind of a changing of the conservative movement, a changing of the Republican Party, and a change in how people on the political right in America have approached the subject of patriotism. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of other people are having a hard time with this. Let's take Jackie Robinson. I just listened to a book recently called 7 Men by Eric Metaxas, and I listened to it on Audible. Great way to redeem the time on the commute back and forth to work and everything. And one of the men that Eric Metaxas profiled was Jackie Robinson, and there was a point where Jackie Robinson said that he would not stand for the national anthem. And it's very interesting because if you study the history of Jackie Robinson, you can't really attack the man's patriotism. He was a patriot. He loved America. He was a veteran in World War II, but he recognized that a statement needed to be made that, you know what, this country's not living up to its founding principles. And this, of course, raises the issue of some of the national anthem protests and stuff and everything. And I've always been very cautious in kneeling at the national. And I personally would not do it, okay? Because I love America, and I think of my father, who was a Vietnam War veteran, my grandfather on my mom's side, who was a World War II veteran, decorated hero in World War II. I think of all of my family and friends that have served in the military. Some of the students that I taught when I was a high school teacher, they went on to serve with distinction in the armed services. And I think about people in the military and law enforcement and so forth that have served this country, and so I'm thinking of them. And I'm also thinking of when I stand for the national anthem, I am standing for racial equality and solidarity. I am standing for civil rights because I'm standing up for the principles of this country. But I have, in the last couple of years, developed a little bit more respect and understanding, at least, for those people who are kneeling because they too respect those principles, but they feel like in many respects our country is not living up to them, and so they're trying to make a respectful statement in that sense, and I can understand that. Even though I personally disagree with kneeling at the anthem, and I personally have some issues with that, just as even as I bring up Jackie Robinson, I disagree with his choice there, but I'm not attacking his character, and I understand that he's a patriot, and so. But then again, you got others who will refuse to stand for the national anthem and who wear T-shirts that honor Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. I don't have much respect for them. Okay, but this kind of explains the view, because depending on how extreme you are over here in this view, this kind of collectivist humanist type view, you're going to be enamored by some of the past collectivist attempts to create a utopian society. And you're going to recognize that, you know what, some of these experiments didn't work out, but at least they tried. At least they tried to create a noble society dedicated to equality and dedicated to justice. Maybe it didn't work out, but they tried, and we need to give them credit because it's more than we're doing. That's how a lot of people over here are going to see things. But I want to bring this back and just say, even in the comments that I just made, what I'm trying to say is that if you become tribalistic, if you become like, hey, my side, it's all about advancing my team across the goal line, then you're going to be the kind of person that can't handle any criticism of your position or your side. And you're going to be the kind of person that can never even look within yourself. And I would say to you, if you're a Democrat or Republican and you're going to look at me in the eye and tell me that your party can do no wrong, I'm going to look at you and say you're either, you're either a moron or you are blind as a bat, okay? Because, I mean, both political parties right now have major problems in them. And our country has major problems right now. And So when I wave the American flag, I'm waving it in the sense that, yeah, I love my country because I live here and I love my fellow Americans. I want to love my neighbor as Jesus said, so there's certainly that. I care about the people of America, so there's certainly that element to patriotism. And I believe patriotism is like a civic friendship with each other. But at the heart of my real patriotism, when I wave the American flag, I appreciate the ideas and principles this country was founded upon. But even more important than the principles that this country is founded on, I look at the principles of the one who I believe created this entire universe. And I realize at this point now, some of you are going to, oh, I can't handle this, too much religion. May I just ask you respectfully, before you reject Christianity, I think you need to understand Christianity. And you may think, well, I went to a Christian school, I've been to church, I understand Christianity. No, you don't. What you understand is maybe some bits and pieces here and there, and what you understand is the culture of the particular churches that you attended, or the culture of the particular Christian school or schools that you attended. That's what you understand. That's not the same as Christianity. Because Christianity is global. It's interesting how I will talk to some people about Christianity, and they'll bring up all the sins committed by American Christian churches over the years. And I'm like, Christianity predates the United States of America. You know that, right? Christianity goes way back. And if you're looking at Christianity just through an American lens, then I would respectfully say to you, you're not looking at Christianity correctly. And so when you look at what is at the heart of Christianity, the answer to that is Jesus. And then Jesus, of course, called apostles and so forth. And the Bible is a written record of divine revelation to mankind, and it's where we have the writings of the apostles and the prophets and the teachings of Jesus all written for us and preserved for us in the Bible. And so as Christians, Bible-believing Christians anyway, we look to the Bible. And so when I look at that question, what is the nature of humanity? I look to the Bible. And I want to read this passage to you, and it's found in Romans chapter 3. Romans chapter 3, and I'm just going to read a few verses here, and I'm going to explain them, and then we'll wrap up, okay? Romans 3, it says, "What then? Are we better than they? No, in no wise." Starting in verse 9 here, Romans 3, verse 9. "For we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin." So Paul here is saying that, hey, both Jews and Gentiles, that describes, by the way, all of humanity. Because if you're in the human race, you're either a Jew or you're a Gentile, in the way the biblical writers looked at it. Verse 10, "As it is written," and then Paul starts to quote a whole bunch of Old Testament passages here. "As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one." We're going to come back to that because that's really the key verse here. Verse 11, "There is none that understandeth, there is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way, they are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one." Notice that phrase, they together have become unprofitable. That's not just talking about financial, that's talking like benefit. In other words, all people are sinners, and even when you group them together, they still have no benefit. That's what Paul is saying. Pretty harsh, but he's quoting Old Testament passage there. "There none that doeth good, no, not one." Verse 13, "Their throat is an open sepulchre. With their tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asps," that's a pretty nasty snake, "is under their lips. Whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace have they not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, that all the world may become guilty before God. Therefore by the deeds of the law there shall no flesh be justified in his sight, for by the law is the knowledge of sin." In other words, the whole purpose of the Old Testament law was just to teach people the knowledge of right and wrong, but really there's a moral law deeper that we all have. Paul talks about that in also in the book of Romans here. But all of us are sinners. All of us are indicted under the moral law, okay? Verse 21, "But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets." And so now this is what I just said, basically, and it's becoming even more apparent, Paul writes, "Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto all and upon all them that believe, for there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." All right, so I'm going to stop there. All right, so basically the key passages in here is that Paul says there's no one righteous, no, not one. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That is the biblical view of human nature. And I want to, if you are professed to be a Christian and you believe that all human beings are fundamentally good and that there is no real basic flaw in them, it's all in society, then I'm going to say to you, you are not in alignment with the Bible. You're not in alignment with the biblical view of humanity. The Bible's view of human nature is that all people, everybody, including you and me, everybody is a sinner. And everyone is not just a sinner, but everyone is thoroughly wicked and corrupt. This is the doctrine that you'll hear in Calvinist circles called the doctrine of total depravity. And I'm not defending Calvinism per se. I agree with some of Calvinism, but I'm a Christian. I identify with Jesus, not with John Calvin, okay? But I do believe in total depravity of man. We are depraved. We are wicked. All of us. All of us. I heard somewhere that pornography makes more money than all the sports leagues combined. Think about that. Now you've got child pornography, child trafficking, which is a huge problem. You've got it's spreading throughout the world. I mean, people are wicked, thoroughly wicked. You've got people committing violent acts against each other. You've got hatred and contempt all around. You look at bullying online, offline, and the stuff that goes on social media. I shouldn't have to convince you of this, and you may be an atheist or agnostic, but ultimately, if you're going to tell me that human beings are fundamentally good, I'm going to say to you, you are ignoring the truth that's right before your eyes. Human beings are not fundamentally good. They're valuable. They are precious in God's eyes, and I'm not saying that we lack the ability to choose to do right. I didn't say that, because I do believe that all human beings are made in the image of God. And I believe that all human beings, therefore, have a knowledge of good and evil, and that human beings have the capacity to choose to do what is right. And this is what the Founding Fathers understood, which is why the Founding Fathers believed that we needed a moral standard to which all people could aspire to. And that's why you've got the glowing words of the Declaration of Independence, and you've got the importance of principles, and reason why for many years in our schools, for example, they would teach values, they would hold up heroes, they would teach. This is why, by the way, just to let you know, this is why we have statues, and some people wonder, why do we have statues? And some people wonder, why was I so upset when they were tearing down the statues? Well, first, if you're going to have the standard that only perfect people get statues, then really all the statues should come down, all the monuments should come down, all the buildings that are named after people should have their names changed. There shouldn't, because ultimately all people are thoroughly wicked and sinners, and you're going to be able to find fault with every person who has a statue erected to them. So if you want to take that position that only perfect people should have statues, then let's bring them all down. I can respect that, and ultimately that means there's only one person left in all of human history that deserves a statue, and that's Jesus, and we're not supposed to build one to him anyway, according to the Ten Commandments. So I can respect that. But the reason why we have statues is because the Founding Fathers believed, and early American generations believed, that heroes are a good thing. That you want to inculcate positive moral values in society, and you want to give people heroes to look up to. And so you want children to grow up reading about George Washington and his courage and wisdom and bravery. You want that because you want kids to aspire to those same principles. You want to teach people about Harriet Tubman and about Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and all that. You want, because you want them. Now, obviously, with all these people, there's going to be flaws there, and that's the delicate balance of history. Okay, Dr. King, wonderful hero, champion of civil rights, but the more you study the man, he had some issues in how he treated women. He was an adulterer, and so it's like, okay. And then you look at, and especially in the Me Too movement right now, there's kind of sensitive stuff there. Washington, great man, but a slave owner. Now, granted, he renounced slavery at the end of his life, but many people believe that was too little, too late, because he renounced it and freed his slaves when he no longer could benefit from them, and so they don't give him any credit for that. So I understand that, but definitely a serious flaw there with slavery, flawed man. But so anytime you're dealing with human heroes, you're dealing with imperfect people, and then you're choosing to focus on the good and kind of downplay the bad, because the whole purpose of the statues and these noble heroes and so forth was to give people things to aspire to encourage people to live out, to use Abraham Lincoln's phrase, the better angels of our nature. But we have to keep in mind that the reason we need to do that is because people inherently, if you're driving along and you take your car out, you take your hand off the wheel, the car is going to run off the road, right? And the same thing is true. Human nature by default is wicked, and if you take your hand off the wheel, we're going to run off the road. So you want to put a lot of values out there and noble principles and statues and eloquent quotes and words. You want to put all that stuff out there to kind of get people to stay on the right path and stay attentive to that, okay? Now, that's the best that human government and human society can do. And therefore, speaking as an American, I believe that our founding fathers were brilliant and had the right idea. Were they perfect? No. I think that some of what they did was atrocious. And I look at American history, there's no way you can defend slavery morally. You can't defend it morally, but slavery was not a unique sin to America. That's something else you got to keep in mind. A lot of times I hear people, when they bash and criticize America for all of its sins, they forget that the other countries in the world surrounding America were also committing a lot of those same sins. In fact, America was one of the first societies to kind of turn against those sins, and that's never heard about today in this growing critique of America. But anyway, so I think there's nobility in setting up standards for people to aspire to. But ultimately, Paul would tell you that's only a stopgap measure. That's a band-aid. Ultimately, what needs to happen is our hearts need to be changed. And the only way to change our hearts is to open our heart up to God and let God change our hearts, because God's our creator. And of course that leads into the other issue about, is there a God? And I'll do that for the next video. We'll tackle that question. But I think it's important to understand the classic conservative and certainly the biblical view of human nature is that human beings are fundamentally flawed. And I would argue to you very strongly, in fact, that is true. And you only need to look at human history and the news to see that that's true. And if you're in the camp that believes that human beings are inherently good, and it's just these organizations and entities that are flawed, then I'm going to tell you that you are standing on a bad premise. And it's not only a bad premise, but it's also a premise that doesn't stand up to logic. Because who do you think makes up those systems? The systems that you claim to be flawed? Who created those systems, and who populates those systems? People. The reason why countries are flawed, the reason why systems are involved or flawed, the reason why families are flawed, is not because the systems are bad. It's because the people are bad. And that's the reality of human nature. You know, John Adams, I'll close with this. John Adams said, writing about our Constitution, in which, by the way, those people, like CNN's Don Lemon says that we just need to burn it all down at this point, tear down the system. And we're seeing this, you know, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's ironic and it's sad, but radicalism is becoming mainstream in America today. And it breaks my heart because rage and anger are becoming mainstream in America today. But the reason why our systems are failing is because people are failing. And so John Adams said this: if you want to replace our systems, by the way, you've got to replace our Constitution, because our Constitution is at the heart of our systems. That's important to keep in mind, and that's what I want you to keep. So those of you that believe that systemic injustice is the problem, as opposed to individual injustice, if you think systemic injustice is the problem, here's a great quote from John Adams talking about our Constitution, which is at the cornerstone of our systems in America. John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." So our Constitution only works when the people are moral. The reason why our systems are breaking down, the reason why our country right now seems to be breaking down, is because the people are increasingly immoral. It's because we now no longer know what to unite around. We no longer know what to rally around. We no longer know what to believe in, because there's been a crisis on all three of those fundamental issues and questions that I brought up at the beginning of this video. We don't know what truth is anymore. Postmodernism has completely taken over and infected our culture and society. And And so postmodernism calls into question all narratives. It deconstructs everything. It calls into question the whole nature of truth. And so, we don't know the nature of humanity, and we don't know whether human beings are fundamentally good or not. What instead is happening, thanks to postmodernism, is now we are placing a value on human beings based on whether or not they agree with us and whether or not they serve our interests. So people that help us, people that support us, people that vote like us, people that look like us in some cases, whatever, people that make us feel good, they're valuable, but people that oppose us or object to us, they're not valuable. We can hold them in contempt. That is what is really ripping our country apart today. So I want to encourage you, and I'm just, I know many of you don't share my Christian faith, and I say this very lovingly, but you should. I believe in religious freedom, and I believe in freedom of thought and freedom of speech, and so I want you to believe whatever you feel led to believe, and I will defend your right to believe it. Even if I think you're wrong, I'll defend your right to be wrong. But I want to just lovingly, humbly, personally encourage you to really take another look at Christianity if you've walked away, or if you think Christianity is not true. Because I would say to you that when you look at all the problems in the world, only Christianity, only the Bible really has an explanation for what's going on right now. An explanation that holds up, that makes sense. And only the Bible tells us a way to get out of it. So I'll leave that with you today. God bless you. I hope you have a great rest of the evening. Take care.